Sheriff's Office dispatch.
Yeah, I'm concerned my daughter's missing, and she did show up at school, and we're worried that she was abducted.
That's okay. I'm going to get some information, and then we're going to have a deputy come and talk to you, okay?
Okay.
What's your daughter's name?
Sierra LaMar.
This is 15-year-old Sierra LaMar. When her mom moved to Morgan Hill, California and took her with her, Sierra wasn't happy. Within a year, she was dead. Then, a series of very disturbing clues pointed the police to an individual with a dark mind. Everyone was shocked just imagining the horrible fate that Sierra had in an otherwise peaceful community. But over a decade has passed since Sierra was taken away, and her body still hasn't been found. So, how did the police convict her killer without a body? And are Sierra's family still holding out hope for discovering her body? This is the full story of Sierra LaMar. Today's story begins with a happy-go-lucky girl called Sierra LaMar.
Sierra was always very charismatic. Her gift was to lift people up when they were down. She tended to have this great, beautiful smile that people were attracted to, and she liked the attention.
Sierra was born on October 19, 1996. She and her older sister Danielle grew up in Fremont, California with her parents, Marlene and Steve. The four of them were a happy bunch, and Sierra was always the life of the party.
She's outgoing, fun-loving, always was goofing around with her friends. But then also she had kind of a soft, serious side.
The two sisters stayed very close, but unfortunately, the family reached a breaking point around 2010. The Lamars got divorced, and Marlene met someone else. Soon, they were a couple, and they decided to start a new life in Morgan Hill, at the southern tip of Silicon Valley. It was a mere 35 miles away from her old home, but Sierra was not happy about this move.
Wanted to change. I liked that it was a big house and, a fresh start.
The separation between our parents wasn't easy for either of us.
The move was a catalyst for constant fighting between Sierra and her mom. Of course, when you're 15 years old, you want to spend time with the friends you already have, not start fresh as a stranger in a new world.
She was struggling with the move, and there were a lot of times where Sarah would just be texting me saying, man, I wish I were in Fremont, this is just... she would just express her feelings as any 15-year-old would.
Luckily, though, this was 2012, which meant that Sierra had access to social media and could easily stay in touch with her loved ones. But Sierra never managed to adapt to life in Morgan Hill. A few months after her move, she would lose her life in a horrifying way. On Thursday, March 15th, 2012, Sierra called Steve and Danielle back in Fremont. She was happier than usual, and it seemed like she was starting to like her new life. She made a few new friends, and she was excited to get her hair dyed on her next trip to Fremont. Her grades had also picked up compared to the previous year, and she excitedly told Danielle about one of her school assignments. Danielle was relieved. Perhaps her little sister would eventually love Morgan Hill. On Friday, the next day, Marlene had to leave at 6 a.m. for work. She was a physical therapist and always started work very early. But as tired and groggy as she might have been, Marlene never forgot to kiss her daughter goodbye.
Before I left, every morning, I would tell her I love her. We were in a new house in a new town. I just felt like I needed her to know that she's not alone. And I left for work.
A few hours later, Sierra would also leave for school on foot.
She would normally walk out the cul-de-sac, and then there was a bus stop about 500 feet away. It was on farmland.
Her high school was a 10-minute drive away. It was a perfectly safe road there, as far as the Morgan Hill community knew. So Marlene never really worried about her daughter making the short journey 5 days a week. But after work, she would give Sierra a call just to check in with her, and on that day, Sierra didn't pick up. As soon as she got home, Marlene went into a panic.
I checked all the rooms in the house. She wasn't taking a nap in her room. I was a little angry, why shouldn't she answer me the phone? Is it because she's with a friend and she didn't let me know?
Marlene rang the school and her blood froze as she found out Sierra never made it to school that day. Then she called Steve, but he hadn't spoken to Sierra that day. While Steve drove to Morgan Hill, Marlene decided to report her daughter missing.
Sheriff's Office dispatch.
Yeah, I'm concerned my daughter's missing, and she did show up at school, and we're worried that she was abducted.
That's okay. I'm going to get some information, and then we're going to have a deputy come and talk to you, okay?
Okay.
What's your daughter's name?
Sierra LaMar.
Do you happen to know what she was wearing this morning?
Actually, no, because she usually, I leave for work and then she gets dressed.
Gets dressed.
Well, yeah.
Okay, what's your name, ma'am?
Marlene Lamar.
Sadly, when the police heard Sierra was 15 years old, they just assumed she was a classic teenage runaway case.
We get so many missing person reports, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and normally had an argument with their parent. They're staying at a friend's house and they don't want to be in communication. And within a couple hours or so, they call their parents or they show up back home.
So when 2 officers arrived at Marlene's home, they asked a lot of questions about her relationship with Sierra. When Marlene told them they had a good relationship, the police asked about her friends and schoolmates, but Marlene didn't know much about them. Sierra was just beginning to make acquaintances in the city. Then, the case seemed to reach a huge roadblock.
And then he was explaining that you have to be missing for so many hours to be considered missing.
This is a pretty sad irony, as in kidnapping cases, the longer you wait, the chance of survival decreases dramatically. Sierra's family was hoping she was just a rebellious teenager, but as the hours passed and she hadn't even texted her sister, only the worst possible scenario seemed plausible. 24 hours after Sierra was reported missing, she was officially logged into the police system. That day, the police went to Sierra's high school in Morgan Hill to interview her schoolmates. They also interrogated her old friends in Fremont.
I interviewed all of her friends. They were all very afraid, very scared. And I remember asking them, what do you think happened to Sierra? Do you think she ran away?
One of her friends said she could have run away as her relationship with her mom had deteriorated after the move.
She was basically just like telling me about how she was from Fremont and just how she missed living over there. She was complaining about how her mom would make her turn off her phone at night and just like be strict on her. Like she would talk about running away. Like to be honest with you, she told me a couple times like she wanted to run away, but
so a teenage runaway case wasn't off the table. When the police constructed a timeline of Sierra's last moves, they discovered she had sent a text message to a friend at 7:10 a.m. She was going to meet her before school and exchange homework and makeup. This was the first sign that Sierra was not planning to run away from home.
Didn't show a child that was planning to run away.
But Sierra never made it to her friendly meeting. The next natural step was to check all CCTV footage on the way from Sierra's home to her school. But Sierra lived virtually in the middle of nowhere, and not even the bus had a camera. However, the detectives could access the camera from inside the bus, so they cued the recording at 7:25 a.m. and looked for footage of Sierra getting on the bus, but when the bus passed Sierra's stop, she wasn't there.
The bus pulls up approximately 7:25 in the morning at the bus stop, and there's no Sierra at all. She never made it to that bus stop. She was never picked up.
It fixed a small window from when her mother left her at home to when she should have been on the school bus.
So between her text message at 7:10 and the bus stopping at 7:25, Sierra disappeared. The case was looking less and less like a runaway and increasingly like a kidnapping. Back in the day, when police had to draw a suspect pool, they would look at family, neighbors, and people at school. But by 2012, social media played a huge role in such cases. So the police began to analyze Sierra's social media life, and as her mother confirmed, she was incredibly active online.
It's unbelievable how much information is on social media. Especially when you're 15, 16 years old, social media is pretty much your life. Sierra LaMar woke up, got ready for school. At about 7, she took a selfie picture on her computer.
This is Sierra's last picture, taken and uploaded on Facebook minutes before her mysterious disappearance. Now the police knew what she was wearing when she was taken. A few days into the case, Sierra's story reached the TVs of everyone living in the California area. People were urged to reach out if they knew anything or thought they'd seen Sierra.
Can't believe that she would not contact her friends and let them know that she's okay and do this. She would never want us to go through all this pain.
During the weekend, 300 volunteer searchers scoured the cities and surrounding desert.
The studies have shown that you have to find them fast. And on that Saturday, we had approximately 300 mutual aid searchers.
Meanwhile, the detectives tried to gather a suspect pool, but here's a dark twist. Sierra lived in an area rife with offenders.
In this case, there are approximately 250 offenders in a 5-mile circumference around where Sierra lived.
It's unthinkable that there could be as many offenders as this in such a small area, and to think how many others go unconvicted. The police sent 20 teams of 2 officers to interview each and every one of the known offenders. Of the 250, at least one would have looked or behaved suspiciously over the weekend, they thought. But incredibly enough, all of them were cleared in just a matter of days.
None of them fit that time period. We were able to clear all of them. Their alibis were solid.
But there was a registered offender who made the police think twice. Shockingly, this was Sierra's dad, Steve.
Was a registered sex offender, and that wanted him to know that instead of him, doing the background check and finding out anyway. I thought it would be better and more efficient for the investigation to focus more on Sierra and finding Sierra.
Steve called the police before they could find out about him through their database. He just wanted to get it out of the way and ensure the police didn't consider him a suspect. But instead, he attracted even more attention from the police afterward. It turns out in 2009, Steve was arrested for lewd and lascivious acts. To make things even more distressing, this all happened at one of his daughter's sleepovers, during which he was inappropriate with one of their friends. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison. In this context, the divorce of Sierra's parents makes a bit more sense, doesn't it? The police spent a fair amount of time uncovering Steve's questionable past, even more worryingly, his recent past. His arrest was a mere 3 years before Sierra's disappearance. But as they did their checks and Steve collaborated with them, they realized he was not a suspect in his daughter's case. The day Sierra disappeared, he was at work in Fremont, and his colleagues could confirm that. What followed was a trail of uncanny clues that would slowly point the police toward a man with a very dark past. It was a bumpy ride and a story that never really got an ending. On Sunday, 2 days after Sierra's disappearance, her phone seemed to give a single electronic ping in the middle of the night. This meant that her phone was switched on and off in a matter of seconds. This was after 2 days of complete radio silence, which was a very bad sign for Sierra, who was always on social media. At sunrise that morning, a search team went to the location of the ping, and within minutes, Sierra's phone was located in a grassy area. The phone was not too far away from a road, and the phone was pretty damaged, so the detectives believe the phone was thrown from the road onto the grassy patch, perhaps from a moving car. This meant that, at least in the detectives' opinion, the phone was never switched on and off manually. Instead, the rain that night had created a false charge signal through a short circuit. The phone only appeared to be on for a second. The following day, the police were searching the farming land outside Sierra's home. Just 2 miles away from her house, outside a barn, the police found her backpack. Her bag was full of objects: her schoolwork, money, accessories, stationery, and an inhaler. But then, here's the grim part. Inside her backpack was also her black top, which she wore in her last selfie.
And it was the same sweatshirt that she took that selfie picture on the day she disappeared.
In fact, all of the clothes she wore on the day of her disappearance were stuffed inside her bag. Even her shoes were inside. The scenario was getting darker and darker. The detectives knew they had to send Sierra's clothes to the lab and check for foreign DNA. Before long, they had found a foreign male profile on Sierra's pants. This meant that she had probably been sexually assaulted after she was kidnapped. But there was more on her pants.
There was debris, not just dirt. There was a form of lichen. We had a botanist come in and explain this to us and told us that this particular type of lichen grows in certain areas and you need some sort of a water source close by. That's how this grows.
But even as all bodies of water in there were searched, no results came up. In a creepy twist, a group of volunteer searchers from the nonprofit Class Kids Foundation were looking through the areas surrounding Sierra's home when they came across a bunch of used condoms. They were near a box labeled stainless steel handcuffs, but the box and condoms were sent to the lab and there was no match with Sierra's DNA. Sergeant Jose Cardoza commented,
We can't confirm that she voluntarily ran away. Nor can we confirm that there was a crime involved.
Over 800 volunteers participated in looking for Sierra or any clues leading to a suspect. Thousands of acres were checked, and experts checked every body of water around Morgan Hill too. Sierra's missing poster adorned every lamppost, wall, and tree in the area. Marlene, Steve, and Danielle raised a $10,000 reward for any information leading to Sierra or her attacker. There was a huge search for Sierra, unprecedented in the Morgan Hill community and huge for even the largest metropolitan areas. But days turned to weeks, and the police only seemed to get further away from the case.
It's day 18 and still no sign of Sierra. But sheriff's investigators are not giving up. They're extending their search, canvassing new areas, looking and praying she will be found alive. Investigators have received hundreds of tips and information from the community, a driving force, they say, that's keeping this case alive. And as for the physical evidence, Sierra's clothing and cell phone, as well as the stainless steel handcuffs and used condoms that were found, are all still being analyzed for any connection to Sierra's whereabouts.
However, on day 12, the police already had a DNA profile they were looking into. They just hadn't disclosed it to the media. After analyzing Sierra's pants for foreign DNA, the forensic team linked the foreign profile to a 21-year-old man living in the area. His name was Antolin Garcia Torres, and he lived just 7 miles away from Sierra and Marlene's home in Maple Leaf RV Park. Antolin seemed to have a pretty stable life, and he lived with his mother, pregnant wife, and daughter. But when the police looked into Antolin's past, they discovered a pretty rough story. He had a very difficult start in life. His parents oscillated between neglect and outright abuse. His dad was a raging alcoholic, and death threats were the norm in their home. Both Antolin and his mom would live in constant fear of him. Eventually, the dad was arrested for sexual abuse of a minor. Yeah, he was literally the worst. You would think Antolin's dad provided the ultimate negative example to his son, and that Antolin would do anything not to step in his father's footsteps. But Antolin seemed to take his dad as a role model, unconsciously copying his behavior in the worst way possible. The police had Antolin's DNA in their database from a myriad of crimes, and remember, he was only 21. First, there was a felony battery resulting in serious bodily injury. Then there was his 2009 arrest for sexual acts with a minor. In 2010, Antolin was once again arrested for obstructing police activity. And then there was an even longer list of very concerning incidents in the area over the previous years. In 2009 alone, 3 different women were the victims of attempted assault and kidnapping from the parking lots of Morgan Hill Safeway stores. A man had approached them at night as they were entering their parked vehicles or while they were sitting in their cars preparing to drive home. The suspect used a stun gun to subdue one of the women entering her vehicle through the rear passenger door, but the woman fought her way out of it and the suspect dropped his taser. In another case, an 18-year-old woman grabbed a pocket knife to try to defend herself when he entered the car. The man grabbing her hand, holding the knife, and placed it close to her throat. On all 3 occasions, the suspect was frightened away by the women or by other people passing by. The suspect hadn't been identified at the time, but the police had an awful feeling about Antolin. Plus, there was the fact that he worked at the Safeway grocery store where these incidents happened.
At that point, we really had to determine, was he known to Sierra? Is he someone that she had come in contact with? Just because you find DNA is not enough to arrest someone for homicide.
So the investigators decided to monitor Antolin's activity 24/7, hoping for a breakthrough in the case. Antolin drove a red Volkswagen Jetta, which was bugged by the police at the end of March 2012. 2 undercover officers moved into an RV neighboring Antolin's, and the CCTV footage surrounding the RV park was monitored. When the investigators checked the footage from the morning of March 16th, they were in for a surprise. Antolin's red car was spotted leaving the RV park at 7 a.m., minutes before Sierra disappeared. His home was 7 miles away from Sierra's, just under 8 miles from her bus stop. So the time frame was perfect.
The drive from Antolin's residence to Sierra's residence is between 10 to 15 minutes. This would put Antolin Garcia Torres right in the location of where Sierra was abducted, at the right time when Sierra would leave the residence to go catch her bus.
Something else pointed to this horrible scenario that day. Antolin never checked in at work. Speaking about his work, the detectives checked in with his manager to ask if he had been involved in previous incidents. The manager then revealed the 3 attempted kidnapping cases in the Safeway grocery store parking lot. And when the police looked into those 3 cases, they discovered they still had a bit of evidence stored away. Remember that suspect had tried to use a taser on one of his victims? Well, he'd left it in the parking lot and the police took it as evidence. At the time, they only retrieved a partial fingerprint from it, and it was not enough to create a DNA profile. But now the police had Antolin's DNA, and they could compare it to the partial fingerprint on the taser. Their worst fears were confirmed. Antolin was the parking lot culprit in 2009. With a history of underage assaults, attempted assaults, and kidnapping, Antolin was a pretty likely suspect in the case of Sierra LaMar. He was contacted by officers 6 days after they started surveying him.
We wanted to make a consensual encounter with him, let him control the interview.
Yep. How you doing? Yep. We have time to talk a little bit.
This was a young man who was very confident, cocky, if you will. He was looking through us like he was smarter than us, straight sociopath.
As if there weren't enough red flags already.
Well, the point is, you know that little, that case we're investigating with the teenage girl that went there? Yeah. Okay. So you know the girl we're talking about then, right? The one on the picture? The one on the picture is all the flyers. Okay. So is there any reason that anyone would say that somehow you and her had a relationship going? I doubt it. Wow.
Antolin vehemently denied even knowing Sierra and mocked the officers for suspecting him. But that only made him even more suspicious in the eyes of the police. 3 days later, his car was impounded and he was brought over for questioning.
I need to know everything you did on Friday, March 16th. Yeah. I'm fishing. I left my house maybe 7:10, 7:20. And got up there around 8. And then after that, cashed my check, went to the gas station.
Of course this was a lie, but Antolin confirmed he was with his car at the very spot where Sierra disappeared. So the police asked him if there was any reason why they would find his DNA on Sierra's clothing.
I mean, it's kind of embarrassing. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed. I do masturbate in my car, so.
Antolin claimed he did this when he threw the napkin on the road. Somehow he says the napkin must have reached Sierra's pants. Yeah, right.
I do have napkins in my car for when I do masturbate. Okay. So I could just not get it on me and throw it out. That's the only way my DNA would get out there that I would think so.
Remember how Antolin said he'd cashed a check that day? Well, the detectives went over to the Bank of America and checked the CCTV footage. He cashed his check just before 1 p.m. on March 16th. This was 6 hours after Sierra's disappearance. Lo and behold, the detectives found a very worrying sight when they checked the wide-angle camera.
You can see the bottom portion of his pants are a little darker than the top portion. We weren't sure if that was water, mud, or just the shadows.
It was consistent with the lichen on Sierra's pants. By May 2012, the results came back from Antolin's car too. Sierra's DNA was on his door handle, and inside the trunk was a rope containing a strand of her hair. On March 21st, Antolin was arrested and charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder. His only response was, "Really?" All clues pointed towards the same scenario. Antolin kidnapped Sierra on her way to the bus stop, took her into his car, and drove her to a marshy area where he violated and killed her. But there was one big problem. There wasn't a body. How could the police convict Antolin? It turns out the evidence was so overwhelming, they didn't need a body. On May 19, 2014, the district attorney's office announced they would be seeking the death penalty for Antolin, but Antolin knew the body would never be found, so he daringly pleaded not guilty. It took 5 long years to start Antolin's trial. It began on January 30th, 2017, and it dragged on for 13 weeks. The prosecution and the defense were at odds big time. Of course, without a body as evidence, this can happen in murder cases. Antolin's defense lawyer argued that he'd been psychologically affected by exposure to pesticides in the nearby fields when he was a child. So poor Antolin was not in control of his actions.
Because he had nothing to do with that toxic exposure, and under those circumstances, They're going to say that is something that he couldn't help, and that is a deficit that he faces as a young man that other people don't face. So this testimony from the expert is designed to go after his mental state and to say that he didn't have a normal childhood.
Well, the defense team knew the evidence was overwhelming, but they at least tried to get him off the death penalty. On May 9th, 2017, Antolin was found guilty of first-degree murder. Marlene looked him in the eye as she asked him to reveal the location of Sierra's body.
You have robbed Sierra of what God had planned for her, and you can choose to make a choice and repent and tell us where she is.
But how could Antolin do this when he was still insisting he's innocent? Antolin will spend the rest of his life in prison with no chance of parole. This seems only fitting, but it's very rare that people get this sentence without a body. It is possible he might never reveal the location of Sierra's body, as that would mean taking responsibility for the murder. In December 2020, Antolin replied to a handwritten letter sent by a digital journalist, Amy Larson. He ignored hundreds of other letters and wrote, "Everyone has typed their letters, and even though your handwriting made me laugh, it's more than other people have done. I'm sorry to say that I have no trust in the news. There is a lot of selective reporting which paints a picture not always true, even if some facts may be true in and of themselves. Yes, Amy, I hold fast to my innocence." He also chose not to reply to some of Amy's questions, arguing, "Some, if answered, may not sit well with others."
I can be satisfied that the predator is in prison. I cannot be satisfied that we've never been able to find Sierra.
We don't know what he did with her. He won't tell us. Only Antolin knows.
I think he has no intention of saying anything. I feel that he doesn't have a conscience.
Because it doesn't benefit him or help him in any way. It's not going to give us that.
The search for Sierra's body officially ended 3 years after her disappearance. It was the longest continuous search for a missing person in US history, and yet no body has been found. Is Antolin's sentence enough justice for Sierra, and will her family ever get closure? Thanks for watching, you guys. What do you think about this case? Will Sierra's body ever be found? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and as always, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more. See you next time, and stay safe.